another book that I co-authored with Dr. Leonard is entitled by the publisher, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You. What a title. I wouldn't think we'd have to put it on there, because when we're just born from mom and when we're nursing, all that breast milk goes down in our stomachs where it's digested up by a whole bunch of acid and pepsin. And it's digested up into the little pieces so it'll nourish us. And when we're children and when we're teenagers, we have very strong stomach acid, and we can eat the refrigerator out. And do we get heartburn and indigestion? No. How many 16-year-olds do you hear of with heartburn and indigestion? You just don't. And yet they got plenty of acid and plenty of an enzyme made called pepsin, and those just digest up all their food and gets into the system, and they grow and are strong. And that's usually the case, at least through our 20s and 30s, that we have enough acid down in our stomachs, but we don't have too much. Why would nature put too much in there? That would be harmful. All right, so then we get, usually, some of us get into our 40s. Some, it never happens, got to admit that, but many people in their 40s or 50s or 60s start getting heartburn, and they start getting indigestion, and there are literally between $8 and $10 billion worth of patent medicine company advertisements trying to convince us that we should take these pills to totally block out our stomach acid. Now, what would happen if we did that, just a thought experiment here, if we were 6 years old? We wouldn't grow very well, because we'd be not digesting protein, not bringing minerals into our bodies, not bringing in vitamin B12. Well, how could we expect to grow as healthy as we should? Somehow we think that's healthy when we're 40 or 50 or 60. What these patent medicines do is literally cause inadvertent malnutrition. We can be eating the best organic food that we want and taking lots of vitamins and minerals, and if that upper part of the digestion, the stomach acid and the pepsin, isn't working, then a lot of that doesn't get into our systems. But since that medication didn't cause us an immediate side effect of I took it and I felt bad, instead I took it and I got malnutrition for 5 years and then I got sick, we don't blame it on the patent medicine is the problem. And so what the point of the book is that messing our digestions up that badly can't possibly be good for the health. And we go through a lot of examples of that. And then we go through what's really happening. What's really happening when we start getting heartburn and indigestion and bloating and belching and gas is almost always, and I really do mean 99% of the time, it is not enough acid in our tummies. Not enough acid? How come that makes heartburn? Well, turns out that since 1970-something, 1976, when we got a gadget in here which very precisely measures stomach acid output, since that time, literally a couple thousand or more folks must have come in that length of time, saying, I've got heartburn, belching gas, and so forth, and they told me to take antacids. That was the early days. Or they told me to take an acid blocker. Or they told me to take something called a proton pump inhibitor. These are all the different medicines. I won't mention their names. And I'll ask them a very simple question. Did you ever have your stomach acid output measured? And you know, since 1976, everyone, 100% of everybody has said no. Never did. And yet, it's a very simple thing to do. It's a very precise test. The specifications for how to do the test were published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, which is the equivalent of our AMA journal. Back in 1969, 1970, the specifications were published there, and we do the test exactly according to those specifications. What we find 99% of the time is that when people have those symptoms, there isn't enough acid down there. So we'll say, you need to go home and take some hydrochloric acid and pepsin pills with your meals. And people say, excuse me? I've got acid indigestion and you want me to take hydrochloric acid? We'll say, yeah, okay. So they go home and they take the hydrochloric acid pepsin with meals according to instructions, and the heartburn quits. And the digestion is better. and nutrients start flowing into the body. And one of the main problems that people have in accompaniment to heartburn, indigestion, bloating, gas, and so forth is, oh, I'm getting more tired, I must be getting older, it must be that. Well, they'll start with the hydrochloric acid pepsin stuff, digest the food, better get more nutrients in. Oh, I'm not so tired anymore. Gee, it must have been malnutrition. It wasn't that I was just getting older. Now, nobody gets the energy levels back of a 6-year-old kid. I'm not talking about that, but I am talking about restoring some degree of normal energy by getting the nutrition in there. It's a very simple principle. Our stomachs were designed to make so much hydrochloric acid and so much pepsin. They were either designed or created or they evolved, whichever one we'd like to believe in. To do that over tens of thousands of generations, what makes us think that messing with that is going to keep us healthy? So, we get the occasional excuse that, well, I've got severe acid reflux disease and it's damaged the bottom of my esophagus. Oh, I just have to block that acid because they tell me I'm going to get cancer. There's a circumstance called Barrett esophagus, which then can proceed to cancer if it goes on. And what we tell people is that, look, if you've already got cancer, then this isn't going to work. But up to that point, it's very possible in many cases to reverse the precancerous changes, to reverse the severe stomach acid problem, and get a person back to the point where they can digest things and stay healthy. There's the very occasional person, and it really is rare, who's got such severe damage by the time they come in here that they have to stay on that acid blocker. It's very rare. When that happens, we then have to give the nutrients by intravenous because their stomachs won't bring them in. And that's sad when a person has to have intravenous. But that's very rare, and most of the time, by restoring normal, not excess, but normal stomach acidity, a person can get rid of their symptoms and stay a whole lot healthier over the next few years. There's another minority, it's probably 5%, where we have to do sort of a stomach reconditioning program because it's so atrophied that even a little bit of acid hurts. But then we have to do a reconditioning program. So basically that's the book in too many paragraphs. I'm sorry I went on for too long. But in too many paragraphs that stomach acid actually belongs there. It's actually good for us. But what I think is so silly, that's almost like saying, brains are good for you. Well, duh, they're there, they belong there. And what's normally present in the stomach, it belongs there, and it's good for us too. Well, we could write a book that says toes are good for you for people who believe that everybody should be toeless. But, okay. Sometimes folks hear about this and they just go take some hydrochloric acid and they feel fine, so they don't bother getting a test done. And sometimes that works, but other times people will take the hydrochloric acid, it'll bother them, oh, I don't need it. And unfortunately that's not true. Some people who take it and it bothers them, they really don't need it. Other people, their stomachs are so atrophied they can't handle it. So the only way we can tell for sure, does a person need this and how much do they need, is by doing the test. The formal name is gastric analysis by radiotelemetry. It uses a little radiotelemetry device that records and does a radio transmission of exactly what's going on in the stomach. Since the whole thing was invented in Germany in the city of Heidelberg, it's sometimes called the Heidelberg capsule. But that is actually the only way we can figure out, does a person really need it and how much do they need with great precision. It's a very precise test.